mostly. Yeah, mostly been together at various in-person events. So I think we can continue unless the commissioners have a different idea. And it won't be me, but my suggestion is to continue the remote and then move to in-person when there are new commissioners that are appointed by council, and as a way to welcome them. Any thoughts from the other commissioners? Does that meet your expectations or preferences?
Yeah, I agree. We should wait till the new members run and then make a decision.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I'll let we could basically maybe have the first meeting with them and then let them make the decision. And I won't be around then, but because theoretically, when the new members come in, my term will be over then. All right, so let's continue there. If there's any other further changes, LP, you'll let us know, but probably give us another update next month on both of these items, but particularly status of commission appointments, because one of the issues is will council get to them before June 30th? And Vice Chair Baker, is your term up on June 30th? I'm wondering. I'm not sure whether there may be more, but there could be reappointments, because I would have to check on that.
I think I was just reappointed.
Okay, all right. So then you're good then. Can you hold on, LP? Let me just check on the city clerk's office. If you give me just a second, which I didn't get a chance to do, I can very quickly look at that. Actually, I'll get back to you, LP. There's no reason.
Yeah, I think let's maybe check that offline, because we just had to help the clerk's office correct a pretty decent amount of data relating to commissioners. So I wouldn't be positive that the information on the website is accurate. So
right, and let's defer that until you can report back and let us know if there are any other commissioners whose terms are up, in which case they should be putting themselves up for reappointment if they are interested, if they're eligible, if they're interested and eligible, or if there's anyone who is at least on paper, according to municipal code, term limited. Okay, so let's the status quo for the moment.
Yep, exactly. Okay, so next couple of items. So an update on some of the items that were raised at our last meeting. So we had a bunch of really good suggestions for future topics for future meetings. So we are going to cover blue zones a little bit today. Another item of interest was around the airport planning. So I wanted to give just a brief update and then sort of see when we might want to try to get them to come in and do present to the commission. So there are kind of two planning efforts that we're involved in at the airport right now. So the first is kind of a shorter term planning effort around their adoption of their new franchises and concessions there. So they're replacing and updating the concessionaires. They had reached the end of the 10-year agreement. One of the concessionaire entities is continuing, and then another is new. So they're doing some pretty significant changes on the food and beverage side, which entail build outs and changing spaces and changing products, things like that. We've had really productive conversations actually with both of those groups. So I'm anticipating that we're going to actually see some pretty interesting stuff on the sustainability front, both in terms of, good approaching zero waste practices, as close as we're getting for zero waste in a commercial airport these days. We're going to be catching up to the leading edge there, I think, a little bit, which will be nice in terms of waste management, the kinds of packaging and foodware that are offered, that kind of stuff. We're also going to probably see some interesting things around recycled materials and furniture in some of the new build outs, energy efficient lighting, things like that. I did really push for all electric stoves. I don't think I'm going to get it, but we might. So we'll see. Around sort of gas hookups, they had some questions around that. And so we pushed for that. But so that I think will be pretty interesting over the next couple, about the next year is when they're looking to do that build out. So should be a pretty significant step change from what's there currently. The second is the airport master planning effort, which I'm learning a lot about airport master plans and sort of what they are and what they aren't. Essentially, the airport master plan is looking at what they think the next sort of 20 to 40 years of air traffic will be at the airport, and kind of working backwards from that. So there's certain things around parking garages, where are the rental cars located, how big are the terminals, what kind of assets are we going to need to support those, what are the projected electrical needs. Some of those do have pretty significant sustainability overlaps. So it's kind of, the sort of capital versus operations differential. So like anything that might be on the capital side might be involved in this master planning effort. That has really just started. So we're over the next like 2 months, I think, going to hear some additional thoughts from the master planning consultants that the airport has retained to do that work. So I think if we were to go in, and Commissioner Baker, I'll come right back to you. If we were to maybe have that group come and give a presentation to the commission, they were asking me sort of like, who are our advocates and allies in sustainability? And I was like, this commission, if there's something on the sustainability front that you guys from a consulting point of view are like, we should try to get this in there, definitely come and talk to our commission. And so I think that's something that maybe around May or June of this year might be an interesting opportunity for either the airport staff or the consultants or both to come and talk to us about one or both of those planning efforts, because I think it'll be probably really interesting for you all to hear directly from them as opposed to the game of telephone through me. And Commissioner Baker, you had a question, go for it.
Does that plan include solar energy for the airport?
It's a good question. I think it could, but that's going to be one of those things that may be sort of on the edge of whether it fits in the master plan or whether it would be sort of like the next thing they do after they finish the master plan. So I think that would be a good question for us to ask them when they come to speak with us.
I mean, they have these giant parking lots, which are just begging for solar panels to A, provide shade for the cars that park there, and B, to provide energy for the airport. I just seems like a no-brainer to me. But
totally. So the example that they gave me when I spoke with their consultants just to kind of learn what was going on last week was, so for example, as they're looking at really massively increased passenger volume at the airport that they weren't expecting, they're probably going to make some recommendations around the fact that they're going to need like more parking, maybe parking consolidation, so they can move the rental car facilities to make way for other airport things. And so they would basically, the recommendation that would come out of the master plan would be something around like, you need to triple how much parking is available. And then the airport would then take that recommendation and then turn that into like an operations plan for a giant new parking garage that we could then say there has to be a bunch of solar on top of it. So I think it's kind of like just figuring out which of the plans we pull that thread on. Solar, I think, could be maybe slightly different, because like where you would put solar might impact like other airport siting and things like that. So I think it definitely could be something that we talk about there, but if it doesn't make it into the master plan, it doesn't mean that we're not doing it, I guess is sort of what I'm saying.
thank you.
Commissioner Torrance?
Thank you. Does it offer any opportunities around, I don't know, well, like contracting negotiation with airline providers to look at increased use of sustainable aviation fuel in their fleets, or preferential sort of contracts with those airlines that are doing that as a means, since obviously we can look at the built environment of an airport, but recognizing that the largest impact related to air travel is the big metal bird. So I'm curious if any of that has come up in the planning process as well.
Totally. So I was pressing them on that a little bit last week when we were talking. I was just like, so are we gonna like be the most sustainable flight center in the country or what? Like, come on. And so what they basically said was, they feel like for the time scale of this master plan, they don't anticipate seeing super significant growth in sustainable aviation fuel, which I was kind of just like, that's not good, because like 20 to 40 years we're like up against so I'm just like, I'm just transmitting information at this point. We can talk about what to do with the information afterwards. But they would anticipate the main impact to the master plan would be around things like fuel storage and potentially fuel sourcing. So like, do we need to be building out new fuel storage tanks? Do we need to blah, 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 and so the more that we're able to in the master plan demonstrate to airlines that those resources will be available, then the more leverage we might have to then come back to the table and say like, okay, 20% of your flights that you fly here by 20 whatever have to be using this fuel or something. But I think that would be another question that I'm going to be attuned to in our broader conversations with them. And then also if we bring them in here, that we can also press them on, I think, as well. So solar and sustainable aviation fuel, I think, are two main things that both I will take back, and then I will request that they come back and talk to us about.
One more while I have you.
Our speakers could please mute themselves. Thank you.
What about sort of alternative modes of connectivity at the airport? I don't know if any of you have tried to, like, you know, ride your bike to the airport to get on the airplane or whatnot. Not that you couldn't, but, you know, or increased fleets, because obviously transit to and fro the airport is obviously something also, and connectivity is an issue. Did that come up in terms of more depots, et cetera?
Yes, so that did come up as well, because I also, like, when I talked to the consultants, I had tried to get, so they did their master planning kickoff meeting as part of the airport commission, and I got to the airport and there were too many people there because it was too popular, so I had to come back to my desk and watch it remotely. But the getting to the airport and back on foot is like, it's like a block away, and it's still just like, you know, Carmen Sandiego situation, like jumping around and like trying to get over there and figure out which sidewalks actually connect. So that was something that I was highlighting for them, both in terms of like, there's no good transit connection, like to pick up the Sunline from the airport, you actually have to come over and go up block past City Hall. I think maybe one of the ways, like one direction you can kind of get off a little bit closer, but most people who are taking the bus, you see them, you know, dragging the suitcase across over here to get the bus. And there's just like not good transit integration. There's no real good place to ride your bike to, like you were saying, no secure bike storage, that kind of stuff. So they did say that intermodal connections are within the scope of the master plan. And that's something that they would look at in terms of how to better connect to the region, like whether that's the Amtrak Thruway bus, whether that's the you know, local Sunline or anything like that, because they are looking at things like rental cars and other multiple modes of transportation. So I think in terms of generally making sure that they are thinking about that with the increased passenger volume, I think that definitely fits within the scope. And then anything around like, where would we site new bus stops? How can we make sure that the routing is going to make sense for people who want to get to ABC place would be in that sort of next phase of like, okay, so what do we do with this information? But yes, definitely something they're looking at.
One more question,
Mhm.
sorry.
No, you're good.
Have they thought about, instead of doing all of these sort of like one-off sort of ideas or what could be considered passion projects, but aligning more of the airport planning to a framework like LEED, where then they could then, a lot of those requirements then would just sort of cascade down, that in order to set a target of wanting to have our airport be, you know, LEED platinum, like, or whatever the more like sort of, I think these models have changed over time, but like, then therefore you don't have to be bespoke about what exactly needs to happen, but a lot of them have prerequisites in terms of getting the certification, and one of which would be siting. So, and accessibility, just another way to kind of not have multiple bullet lists, but more of a comprehensive plan, if that's
Yeah,
come up.
totally. So and this is something that I has been on my reading list, but I haven't dug into. So when we were talking with them, they mentioned that the current, like the closest thing to a gold standard for airports currently is an FAA set of draft recommendations that was published in 2005 and has been updated multiple times since, but has never been approved as not draft for, I'm sure, many nonsense political reasons around sustainability in airports. So it covers a lot of different aspects of airport operations. And so that kind of is what the consultants say that they generally use. And it has kind of the general frameworks, but I will say I haven't read it. So I don't know how closely it hews to other guidelines that we might be familiar with in sustainability around, like, you know, Passive House or LEED or whatever other stuff we might want to use. So that's kind of like a thing that I think is worth us pressing them a little bit more on to make sure that we don't miss anything. And that we don't have to bring, you know, we don't have to remember every single bullet point because I'm worried I'm going to forget something. But also something I need to look into a little bit further to see how applicable those guidelines might be.
Right. In a past life, in a former consultancy that I worked with, we helped develop guidelines for LAWA, which
Cool.
sort of guidance around, I think it was LEED silver, LEED gold, because Mayor Garcetti had made a pronouncement that all sort of like entities within the sort of county's jurisdiction would be sort of in line with those frameworks. So there's other airports that are obviously much larger that have different frameworks as well. So, you know, not reinventing the wheel. And there are definitely sustainable aviation organizations and associations that I'm also, we could put them in contact with as well, beyond that I think 2005 is a pretty old document. So
I think, luckily, I think the information in it is more current than 2005, but maybe not all of it. So, yeah, I think that makes sense. So what I'm hearing is that it probably would be good for us to try to bring the consultants maybe to our April meeting, if we can, and if not, maybe the May meeting, because those will still be well within their early planning phases. I mean, this is probably going to be like an 18-month process. So, so that way they have a chance to hear from the commission. You all can have a chance to hear directly from them now that they're starting to get their feet in and they know a little bit more about what they might be actually looking at. So I can do that. Go ahead, Commissioner Baker.
As a point of information, a lot of the airlines here are only here because the city pays them to fly year round. So while it's in our best interest to try and have more sustainable aircraft and stuff, being a small airport, we're sort of, our hands are tied. So for instance, American United, we had to have a deal with them to have flights at all during the summer.
Wow.
And also there's Vice Chair Baker will appreciate the term federal preemption, i.e. the FAA regulates an awful lot of things. So there's clearly, the city's ability to sort of decide what a, interstate airline is doing is somewhat limited in that respect. But it's good just to share the information. So if they would be available for April, that would be great. Commissioner Barrett, you had a further thought?
Very short, and one is an impressive amount of work there already from LP. The other thing is that I'm probably going to miss the April meeting, so let's try for the May meeting.
Okay, because if it's the last day of it's the tax due date, is that
Actually, no, I have to go to San Francisco for a friend's health issues with his partner being hospitalized, or incapacitated. So
would you be back like in a day or two later or something like that? So why don't you off channels work with LP? And a question, if we're still on 361, can you without sort of publicizing a remote location, perhaps that would be an option that you could connect
well,
with.
I did think about that, and I just looked, and I will be I'll be in San Bruno, so on the day of the meeting, so I can. If you're going to bring the airport commission in, then I will make sure I'm in my motel with a connection.
So, okay,
Gotcha.
yeah,
I'll
LP, if you can,
I'll see what they think is the best in terms of when they feel like both it would be most helpful to hear from y'all and when they would have something to share, so that maybe that'll be April, maybe it'll be May, but I'll reach out to them and figure out when they want to come.
Okay, but if there's also, just to accommodate, if possible, accommodate Commissioner Barrett, if that's possible, under either we move the meeting a day or alternatively confirm that since we're still under AB 361, that he can connect remotely in that respect.
Perfect. I can do that.
Okay.
Okay, so any other airport questions or thoughts? This is really helpful as we also can send over like a short agenda to them of just like things that this group would want to talk about. Obviously, we wouldn't have to stick to that.
Great, yeah, that'd be good.
Okay, so I'll just move on. I have two very quick, two and a half very quick other things. So speaking of visitors to future meetings, so I know we also had mentioned wanting to bring desert compost at one of our previous meetings. At whichever of the April or May meetings that the airport doesn't come to, I think would be fine to have desert compost join. The last we spoke to them, they were really just kind of ramping up on their new site. So I think this spring will be a good time to re-engage them. So I'll probably just, I'll work with the airport first because desert compost is a more local group and tends to be a little bit more flexible on scheduling. So but really looking forward to having them back. And so I'll work with the airport and with desert compost to see which would make sense. But wanting to ask this group if there are any other efforts that are going on, any other groups that we haven't heard from in a while that you wanted to check in on. I know we've got the general plan and the housing element really moving forward. I think this group has been pretty plugged into that, but if you would like to hear from that group, I'd be happy to bring them in. Anybody else that you think it would be helpful for us to re-engage with or engage with in the first place?
I think I had heard a previous request for the Prescott
Right.
Reserve, Osgood Land Trust.
Yep.
I believe one of the commissioners had made that request previously, so we could.
Yes, you're right. I apologize.
I had mentioned that previously. I think it's still an ambiguous situation. With,
It's a little tangled, but I can see when would be a good and who would be a good representative for us to engage there. But yeah, definitely can do that. I mean, I'm getting tons of questions about Prescott and stuff too. So, I always take the opportunity to learn. Another group that I think it could be interesting to bring in is whoever like would be the right sustainability representative from the tribe. Because we haven't, I know we engage with them a lot on the planning front. And so I've kind of gotten to know a couple of people on that side, but in terms of like general sustainability, because I know we've talked, Commissioner Baker's brought some operational things that you've seen. There is the planning side. So maybe having a conversation with the tribe could be interesting in the next couple of months as well. So got Oswit, tribe, anybody else? Any like, Yeah.
That probably should take us through the rest of this term.
That's true.
And then the new commissioners, I'm sure will have lots of great ideas.
Great. Okay, cool. So then I'll move on to my final two things. So one is just a quick update on hiring. So wanted to thank Commissioner Barrett for joining in on what was going to be 4, but ended up being 3 finalist interviews for our sustainability, climate and sustainability specialists here. So we did get a really interesting slate of candidates with a lot of really good government experience. So I think that's always the question, at least when I've done hiring in public service in the past, is you get a lot of people with really interesting experience, but not a lot of government background, which for me is like not necessarily a prerequisite, but certainly does help because it indicates a familiarity with and a desire to engage with the tools of local government, which are slightly different than sometimes tools in other organizations, not totally different, but a little different. So we do have, of our 3, we have a ranking. There is one very clearly very strong candidate, and then the other 2 were neck and neck and both real good. So I'm completing reference checks this week because we just wanted to kind of get a little bit more of a sense on that. And so we should hopefully have people to introduce to you all at our next meeting in April. So that will be great. And we'll literally just like triple the capacity of the department, and so many things will just be happening. So looking forward to them being able to meet the commission here soon. But thanks again to Commissioner Barrett for helping with those interviews. It was really helpful.
Thank you.
it was an interesting process to hear some perspectives from around the country and the process, and to rethink what we do. So I appreciate being asked.
Any other questions on that before I move to my final thing?
All right, thank you for that update then.
Okay, one more thing then. So Environmental Champions Award. So we talked at our last meeting a lot about a bunch of different Earth Day things. We're going to talk more about Earth Day when we get to down to the business. But one of the things that Anita flagged in her research was that, obviously you guys know this, but we didn't know this because we weren't here, that the city has given environmental champion awards in the past, both to K through 12 students and then also to members of the community. So there's kind of like a youth award and then an adults award, for lack of a better term. Though I think potentially businesses could also qualify. It does look like this commission had a pretty heavy involvement in selecting awardees. I don't know if this is something that we'll be able to have for April, but we can bring a formal proposal back in the April meeting if this is something that the commission would want to maybe consider doing again, like having an awards sort of process. We're looking for opportunities to recognize and highlight different kinds of environmental activism in the community. So if that's something, just kind of wanted to get a temperature check, like, do we like the awards? Was everybody like, we stopped doing that for a reason? Kind of mostly before Anita and I decide to bring back a proposal in April.
My only thought is to hold off bringing that's something that we could hold off until we have new commissioners.
Oh, fair.
It seems, and have them be a part of the process of deciding where we're going to go with that.
Okay.
But I think it's a good idea.
It is a decent amount of work. We're out for a combination of both outreach and then determining, good idea, Commissioner Barrett, to part that for new commissioners. Yeah.
I just got a response on the EV chargers.
Oh, okay.
DAP purchased the 4 new ones. The city has nothing to do with those as they're still under warranty with Embry. Now the old ones, the city takes care of those.
Okay, great. I need to find where the old ones are, but I will do that.
That's good.
Great. That's really helpful. Yeah, because I know where the new ones are. But I don't know if they're in a different location. I don't know where the different location is where the
We
old ones
pulled
are.
them up, so I think they're probably in storage because that's where
Oh.
the confusion is. They're probably just in the
Got it.
closet somewhere.
Okay, cool. Great. That's really
But
helpful.
they're definitely
Thank
not
you, Commissioner.
installed anymore.
Got it. Okay, good to know. Awesome. That's very helpful. Thank you for finding that out for us. Okay, that's all I got. I'm good. For now.
Okay, next agenda item is approval of the meeting minutes from the February 23rd, 2023 regular meeting. And Commissioner Barrett, you had an amendment for us that you'd like us to consider.
Yes, it's very minor. The meeting minutes had the ad hoc subcommittee on whatever it is underneath Scour, and it needed to be at the same level. I explained that. Anita's already provided one example of how she would do it. So it's a change from the minutes that we posted.
Okay. All right, so if we can all, I think we don't need a formal motion, but the understanding is that we'll accept those minutes with that change.
That's fine with me.
Okay. All right, that's fine. Next, we will go to old business and the soon to be discussed at council environmentally preferable purchasing policy.
Yes, okay, so thank you all for your time, both in helping to develop this policy and in reviewing it with us last month. So this is going to council on Thursday. We are the final item on the agenda, so I don't know whether that's good or bad. We'll see. It's my first time presenting like a total new business to this council, so it should be interesting. So it's going to be a joint presentation between our office and procurement. So we're going to be up there, shoulder to shoulder, showing a real kind of united front on the implementation and design side. So we are anticipating the questions that we've gotten so far from council members are kind of along the lines of like, cool, how do we use this to help other people do this too? So they're kind of like positive generative questions so far, though you never know. We are planning to emphasize both the degree to which actually quite a lot of city operations have adopted pretty significant portions of this already, both because we thought this was, or the city thought this was going to be passed a year ago. And then also some of the things that are in here are already codified under other parts of state or local law. So kind of going to be presenting it as a useful fait accompli, but something that helps us build on new things. There's also kind of two different mechanisms within, or sort of ways that the EPP talks. So there's both requirements that you have to do now, and then kind of directional guidance for when people might have a little bit of discretion around like, here's what's the next most sustainable thing you could do. So going to kind of talk about, getting us on an even baseline and then hoping to continually move forward. After that, we are going to be doing some pretty extensive training. So Anita's taken the lead on drafting the sort of core of our training materials for city staff. We're thinking about a few different audiences here. So the primary audience obviously is like our power purchasers. We do have an awful lot of people who have purchasing authority in the city of Palm Springs, which makes it and it's not necessarily like all people in the same position title. So in some cases it's a program coordinator, in other cases it's an account specialist. I mean, like it's different people have, it's hard for us to immediately identify, but we do know like who are the 20 people who purchase the most Office Depot stuff. So those people, for example, are going to get a very detailed training. Anybody who manages large scale contracts around like facility maintenance, that kind of stuff, where these requirements will be promulgated through there. And so those people are going to get like a kind of a detailed training. Everyone is going to get a basic training because almost everyone in the city of Palm Springs theoretically is allowed to purchase things in certain circumstances. So kind of like a one pager and like a short recorded webinar. And then we're also going to be hoping to pull from those two audiences kind of like our environmental champions, so to speak. So who are the people who really kind of hear this and a switch goes off in their head and they're thinking, oh, I want to be able to be more of a leader on this, or I already have gone out of my way to find this kind of like recycled hemp t-shirt or something. And so kind of bringing those people together to understand and help each other identify kind of the best, the leading edge products, and then help us really understand what we can put into future updates of EPP. So that's kind of my hope, is that we can find like 6 people across the city and continue to cultivate and empower those people who are already leading and doing sustainability work, and just kind of help them do that a little bit more efficiently and with a little bit more support. So yeah, so that's kind of how we're going to be spending a lot of April on the internal side. We'll be doing kind of a big training for our power purchasers, our general training for everybody, and then really hoping to kind of empower those additional people. But otherwise, so far, so good, as far as I know. Is there anything that this commission would recommend that we definitely highlight at the council meeting? Any questions that have come up since you've been thinking about this a little further?
Mr. Barrett?
I don't recall hearing anything that has made me think about this from council's side. I have seen that it seems that Parks and Rec does relatively well, but that seems like an area where there's a fair amount of consumption.
Yeah, true.
And an area to be stressed. Hopefully the pool issues are not going to be part of this, but that could be part of it in some way.
Yeah. It's true. Yeah, I think we're going to kind of see where all the things pop out, that like all the purchasing of things that we don't even know about, and all the different kinds of procurements that we do that we don't even, I think the thing that's going to be the hardest for us to track down, though we've had good support from procurement, so I'm not like worried about this, but the hardest thing is going to be anything that's contracted out. So like, for example, all of our facility cleaning, that's contracted out to like a nest of third parties. And so figuring out how we get these requirements all the way through there. We are also being mindful of multi-year agreements and making sure that we don't like force a bunch of changes in on a multi-year agreement that's then going to jack up the price by 30%, because we don't have the ability to go out on the open market and get, you know, good bids for that. So we're going to be mindful in implementation, and we are encouraging people, if they've already bought a bunch of stuff, use the stuff you bought, so we don't just like create a bunch, unless it's like poisonous and bad, in which case we should get rid of it. But if somebody's already bought a bunch of paper that's 10% recycled and we want them to use 30, you know, we want them to use up that paper first before they get the new paper, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think LP, you answered one of the questions, is the extent it applies to some of the enterprise funds, i.e. the airport, going back to the airport. I mean, that doesn't require a master plan to buy clean products for the, you know, for some of their facility uses. And also the wastewater treatment plant, which is operated by Veolia. So you might want to sort of flag that. Obviously, that may require, you know, contract over when the contracts come up, but that clearly would be something that we want to make sure that that going forward the contracts are brought in line with policy.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the airport, my understanding is that actually quite a lot of the airport's operations would be subject to EPP. So we've sent that over to them. It also helps because the airport's actually been really, I think I mentioned this last time, they've been like really gung-ho and excited about implementing a lot of this stuff. So I think for them, they're just really looking for guidance on what to do. So luckily EPP provides a lot of that guidance. Wastewater treatment plant, I don't actually know. So I'll need to look into that. Thanks for that flag.
Yeah, I mean, it's operated by Veolia,
Right.
And so it's essentially an operating and maintenance. So that may be sort of like the, you know, the cleaning facilities, et cetera, which is they do that, but that doesn't mean that you can't, you know, discuss that with them and move towards that direction.
Sure, totally.
So that would be my recommendation. And I guess the question is it worth having one of the commissioners? I'm looking at Commissioner Barrett, because you were more actively involved than I was, and for various reasons, I probably don't want to show up in front of council because I wear too many hats. But it would be helpful, Commissioner Barrett, if you're interested, of either phoning in or showing up, and just a couple of words saying that, you know, this is something that the Sustainability Commission supported. I believe the Sustainability Commission formed an ad hoc meeting, commission recommendation, which are summarized in attachment C. So it's there already in the staff report, but, you know, Commissioner Barrett, if you're so inclined, you know, a couple of words to sort of, you know, encourage council to move forward with it, you know, on behalf of the commission would be nice.
I can handle that. I'll negotiate it with LP about when, where, and how.
Yeah.
And as long as I can skip the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can do it from home. I mean, they're still taking public comments from, you know, from on the phone, as long as you let the city clerk know a day or before. So if you would do that, I would like have this is something that clearly was council member, whether it was mayor then at the time, but the point is this went to council first without us getting directly involved. This was probably now 2 years ago. Roy was chair then, and then it got sent back saying, why hasn't this been sent to the Sustainability Commission? So this is a clear, this is a case where council did ask for our input and expertise. So if a member of the commission who did in fact provide that expertise can be available to sort of say, yes, thank you very much, and please adopt this, I wouldn't mind seeing that. And it gets us a sort of top of mind in front of the council members.
Okay, makes sense.
And maybe you can find a way of swim yeah, it's on the agenda. So the other issues is not on the agenda, so they probably wouldn't be able to speak at the first time. Anyway, I'll let you coordinate that with LP.
Okay.
Cool. I appreciate
Yeah,
that.
no, I think I recall the process of how it came to us, and it went through without coming through us, and then came back and went through us, and I recall Commissioner Torrance providing some helpful stuff on I think it was on the he focused on the issue of clothing materials and such that we buy and consume. I remember.
Yeah, and I looked at some of the energy and water issues, so it was very much a joint effort to.
Right.
And it is a stronger document as a result. So I appreciate everybody's work on that.
So sometimes having documents by committee can be good. Okay, so I think that's it. And then Commissioner Barrett, you'll coordinate with them with the LP on that. Okay. Next is turf conversion.
Yep. So this is just a short update this month. We are well and truly out of our expanded rebate or our additional expanded rebate that has been fully spoken for. So I think most of those projects are actually either complete or nearing completion. So the 90-day windows for the second round of funding are starting to close here pretty soon. So that's been pretty popular. People have been much more understanding this go round that there is no more money, which has been helpful, but we are still waiting to hear if there's going to be any movement on next year funding. We put in a request in our budget process, but we just haven't heard much on that yet. And the DWA is actually hosting a landscaper workshop on Thursday, at which I believe they're planning to work with landscapers to understand some pivots they want to make to the low income program in particular that would help get us out of the situation where despite even a more enhanced rebate, most people who are low income who would qualify for that program are not able to do the initial capital outlay and then receive the money back afterwards. So I'll be able to report back on that soon. I don't know that they've made that public yet, the sort of what they'd like to do instead with that program. So I will be, Anita and I are going to attend that on Thursday to support the city side. We're also going to be talking about the need to distribute all the mulch, which I know we had a great conversation about, I believe, at our last meeting. So we're going to be using that as an entryway into getting some of these landscaper companies ready for our mulch. That's where we're at on turf.
Okay, all right. Any questions, comments? Let us know if there's anything we can do to obviously encourage council. Obviously, you know, it's a budget process, and understand there may be some challenges for this coming fiscal year, but this is clearly a very popular, probably the most popular program that the commission's ever done. In the commission office.
There was the issue that DWA has announced that they had extra money. Haven't they just recently announced that they have extra money for turf conversion?
They just re-upped their pot of money. So they added an extra $1 million. I think this year they put in $3 million total, I want to say.
And how does that create, that would seem to create problems about us working with them.
How so?
Am I making any question?
I think I'm not totally sure I call the
money.
question. Yeah, so basically they, I think, are kind of trying to also encourage us to put in more money by saying they're putting in more money. So if they've got more money, then hopefully we would be able to add some more money too, to be able to match that. I think they're kind of trying to throw the gauntlet a little bit, which I respect. But I think it'll depend on the timing of their funding and how long it lasts.
Okay, yeah, it seems awkward.
Yeah, I think I'm not too stressed about it, but I agree that if we had our money available now, I think that would be great. But they're still getting pretty steady applications, and so they want to make sure that they continue to get those in the queue before people decide that we're out of a drought and they don't need to convert their grass.
And that's a main agenda for all of us, is to convince people we're not out of the drought.
Mhm.
We may be underwater, but we're not out of the drought.
Mhm.
Yep.
Okay,
Okay, all right, well, that's good. We can definitely continue on that. Okay, that I think is that for that one. Implementation of SB 1383, the Evergreen agenda topic.
Yes, so we actually don't have a ton of new information on this one this month. So we are going through our first, this is sort of SB 1383 related, but the first annual rate increase process for PSDS, which is a part of the new franchise. They didn't have a formal annual process in the past, so we are looking through that as we speak. I think there is an annual percentage increase that's pegged to the CPI index that is allowed under the franchise agreement, which I think is in the neighborhood of about 6%. So we're just reviewing their calculations and making sure they're following the new rules and things like that. I'm looking at a lot of spreadsheets and checking a lot of formulas to make sure things work. So that's kind of one thing that's happening there. Otherwise, we are working with Liz and her team to continue to do outreach. We are focusing on the pails, which is something I'm just trying to figure out how we buy. We will also be, I know it's something I've been working with Denise on, to get our neighborhood or our agency access to Nextdoor, which I know is based on Commissioner Torrens' good research last time. I know that's going to be a good platform for us to continue to work on. And then also continuing to contemplate, as Paul had mentioned to us, focusing maybe on 1 or 2 neighborhoods to try to do a full court press and figure out how particularly we activate multifamily. They had particularly suggested Canyon Corridor down towards south. I believe it's Canyon Corridor, right? Is that the
Yes.
name of it? Yes, thank you. That we focus on. I'll be honest, we have not hit that one yet this month. Though we did get some really interesting data from Liz at the last 1PS meeting, which is she's actually seeing a 65% participation rate citywide, which is crazy to me, like really good. I was going to feel good if we got to 50% by the middle of the year. Maybe this is my, city government pessimism, but 65% participation based on the lid flips and things that they're doing. And, I haven't gone through every data set or all the data to kind of figure out what the confidence interval is there. Like, is it 65 plus or minus 65? I don't know, but that is a pretty strong number for 6 months into our program, especially given the kind of challenges and gaps we've had around outreach and education. So that is the SB 1383 latest from me. But happy to answer any questions.
Okay, yeah, comments, questions?
Yeah, this is not a question. This is sort of skipping slightly on agenda. Out of Scour, we've talked about all these issues also about implementing 1383, and this is what I would be saying in the Scour report. That's why I say I'm out of sequence. We're very concerned about multifamily issues, about involvement in multifamilies, and we have a large number of multifamily units in Palm Springs. So the 65% sort of makes me wonder, maybe that's 65% of the single family homes or something like that. It seems high. We're concerned about how well it's happening in those multi-unit places. And I did have some comments about mulch, but I'll hold those until we get to the Scour subcommittee report.
I would imagine that 65% is, I would imagine the denominator of that is like PSDS account holders. So that would actually potentially skew the percentages or numbers, because some multifamily units, like for example, my 7-unit complex is technically 1 on PSDS's rolls because there's only 1 billing for my whole complex. And so I could imagine that even for like large, 50, 100 unit complexes, if it's a centralized billing, then that's just a unit of 1. So that might skew the numbers a little.
That's and for mobile home parks, there's one
Right.
one bill for 300 people.
Totally. So yeah, so I can imagine that, that 65% of PSDS accounts is participating. could totally be possible, but that's not necessarily a reflective percentage of households in the city of Palm Springs currently.
Of the level of change that we need.
Sure. Yep, totally. No, great point. Thank you.
Okay, all right, to be continued, briefly, you want to get a scour, and then, of course, always next month, there's a standing implementation, SB 1383 item. All right, I think we can move down to new business, review plans for Earth Day and month events and activities.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so I am also probably going to tag Anita in here a little bit as well, because she's been really doing quite a lot of great work on this front. So we really appreciated the conversation we had in the last month's meeting. As I think we mentioned in the last month's meeting, last month was pretty close to Earth Day already. And so we were going to do our best to do as much as we could from that list, and then save the rest of that list for next year when we have a lot more time. And so really kind of the strategy that we're taking for this year is plugging in and supporting existing events and trying to layer environmental messages within those events. So I'll actually turn it over to Anita to talk about a couple of the events that we're going to be supporting and some of the ones that we've got on our calendar. We're using all of those different events to target slightly different audiences and messages. So we've got a good set of like multi-generational events, like some, oh, sorry, lost my Zoom there for a second. There you guys are. Multi-generational events targeting lots of different age groups within the city, events in different parts of the city physically, and then speaking to different audiences around transportation, waste, buildings, etc. So Anita, do you want to maybe run through a couple of the, just as examples, a couple of the events that we're going to be supporting?
Yeah, and I didn't think I would be making a presentation. Let me open my calendar. But fortunately, there are a lot of events taking place in the city. The library has some great events. They have an event for young children where they're planting cactuses, so we're going to assist them with that. They have a film on climate change, so we're going to participate in that. There's a preservation meeting that is on the City of Palm Springs website. It's in conjunction with the Historic Preservation Commission and Sunnylands, and it speaks to sustainability. So we're going to try and do something there. There's the 1 PS meeting. The rest of it is basically looping into having booths at various events like the 1 PS picnic or family day, and that's pretty much it. The Family Fun Fest, having a booth there. On Administrative Professionals Day, that's going to be something that we're going to try and focus on providing information to admins, coordinators, because they usually book the travel, order the supplies. And so that's a good way to, they would be good advocates for making sustainable purchases and adopting sustainable practices. So that's basically where we are for this year.
Thank you, Anita, for the on-the-fly presentation that Anita learned she was making at the same time you all heard that you would be receiving it. So thank you for that. We are also going to work with Amy and Denise to do an op-ed in the Desert Sun. So in that op-ed, we're going to use the opportunity both to tie into the nationwide Earth Day framing, which is investing in the future, and then using some of that very well-timed, extremely depressing data from the IPCC. There's one graph in particular that it's like sort of 2 hockey sticks down of like emissions cuts needed to reach 1.5, emissions cuts needed to reach 2. And then there's a nice red line at the top that's pretty much flat that just says implemented policies. And it's just one of the most disturbing images I've ever seen in my life. But so that provides some good framework. We are hoping to also pull out some of, both the current policies that we have going. So around SB 1383, around our existing rebates, around turf conversion, and then also start to pull in our building electrification stuff that we're going to be focusing on for the rest of this year, and then talk about the opportunities and needs around transportation. So we will be in that op-ed both kind of talking about victories that we've had and then sort of teasing the next couple of things. So I'm sure you all will see a draft of that before it gets sent out, but that's another kind of comms play.
Yeah, if you circulate a draft, we have a chance to comment on that and throw provide
Absolutely.
For the commission.
And that's something that we're still trying to figure out the exact timing. I think Anita and I are hoping it will go sort of in the earlier part of April, to set the tone for the whole month. But it's possible, since maybe Earth Month is not an officially observed holiday, that they'll want to peg it to Earth Day itself. So we'll see.
All right, that's good. That's really good information.
So yeah, so we're mostly going on a comms blitz this month, and then next year hoping to maybe do a couple of our own things. We also, there's Climate Week, which happens in September, which is kind of a Northeast thing so far, but I think having a fall anchor for environmental events and comms can be helpful. So Anita and I have started talking about like maybe whether we want to do a couple of like mini things around Climate Week that's like mid-September, but that's TBD. Any
Okay.
other thoughts or things that we should make sure to do, or things that you really are hoping that we manage to pull off that we can do our best to try?
No, I think that's it. I mean, obviously with new staff coming on board,
Right.
that's going to be, that's a fun project that they can get quite involved in and be able to
Absolutely.
sort of do more and more events from next year then.
Totally.
Stay tuned. What day actually is Earth Day? Is that the same day as our commission meeting on the 18th?
It's actually a Saturday this year. So
Oh.
it's Saturday, the 22nd, which is normally I feel like they pick, because it goes between the 20th and the 22nd. It bounces around, but usually I feel like they pick the weekday one, but it's Saturday this year.
Okay, all right, 22nd. Okay.
So, but close to our meeting.
Maybe then that would be good if maybe have a booth. Maybe that would be a good day to have a booth at the farmer's market. It'll still
Yep.
be outside then.
Totally. Yeah, we'll definitely be there on the 1st, and I'll probably make a repeat appearance on the 22nd.
Okay, great. Okay, all right. Next we have Blue Zones.
Yes, okay, so Blue Zones. So I don't have a formal presentation that I'm going to make on this, though I can share some of the slides that the city presented back to Blue Zones. So what I'm really going to try to do here, as opposed to talk too much about what Blue Zones is, though I will do that, is talk kind of about what I understand the process to be and the avenues for input and the things that I am anticipating seeing out of this. So Blue Zones, for anyone who was not in any of the meetings over the past couple of weeks, there were a bunch of people there, so I couldn't really get a good sense of who was there and who wasn't, is it grows out of this like body of research that was done by a pair of brothers who are independent researchers and National Geographic to understand what are the characteristics of places where people live on a higher than average rate to be over 100. So really kind of trying to understand, why these places have so many centenarians, I think is the word specifically. They identified 5 places in the initial research. Interestingly, they're all like equatorial, like they're all sort of in the same like latitude band, which did not come up, but was a question I had. I was like, are you sure this isn't like a latitude thing? But whatever. So it's, places like there's a place in Greece, there's like I think is Sardinia, like Okinawa, Japan. Actually Loma Linda, California has an extraordinarily high percentage of people over the age of 100, especially within the Seventh-day Adventist community. And I think one other place, but I'm blanking on it, but these places had a few things in common. So a lot of them having to do with lifestyle factors. So natural movement, like walking a lot, having relatively physical lifestyles that they persisted even into old age, a high degree of social interconnectedness. So especially intergenerational, but also within the generation, like social connectedness, diets that were generally speaking like low in processed food and diverse in vegetables and things like that, like not a lot of cake, unfortunately, and pretty active and close-knit communities, so walkable communities, places where a lot of things were available within a decent distance, like access to good medical care, clean and fresh air and water, shelter, security of shelter, various things like that. And so basically what happened with that research after it was published in National Geographic was that it sort of became effectively a consultancy. So they've been working with cities, particularly in the United States, to see how they can adopt different aspects of what they've refined into a 9-point model around different types of different recommendations around urban planning, city operations. They've worked with a lot of health districts, like a lot of health centers. Riverside County's health department is actually leading the Blue Zones effort for Riverside County. And they're looking at 6 different cities that do not include Palm Springs on sort of a parallel track. Coachella is actually represented from the Valley in that study. The other cities are like other parts of Riverside County. But Palm Springs is kind of joining that effort a little bit in parallel. And so what the firm, or I always call it like Blue Zones the firm as opposed to Blue Zones the concept. But what Blue Zones, the organization, is currently doing with the city of Palm Springs is what they call sort of like a feasibility assessment. So they're coming in and they're looking at the city of Palm Springs across like what are some of our different urban initiatives, what's the degree of walkability, you know, what are the ways in which people can develop and maintain community, what's access to healthcare look like, you know, what's the food system look like, and then talking to a lot of people who are engaged in the community. So they had a series of different events last week where they had both a public presentation and then a couple of focus groups to talk about different issues. I was part of the built environment focus group, which it's one of the things that's interesting is that housing does not appear to be super high on the Blue Zones criteria list. And I'm not totally sure why that is. I'm not super familiar with the research, but sort of like, you know, access to housing, availability of affordable housing, that kind of thing. But that was pretty much the main thing that was brought up both in the general session and also in the focus group around healthy, safe, consistent, and stable housing as being a major driver here in the city of Palm Springs. But essentially kind of getting some different feedback from different participants. And then the consulting firm is going to kind of go back and rank us on the list of 9 criteria effectively and sort of give us a sense of our readiness so that the city can then decide whether to embark on a 1 to 3 year project with Blue Zones to actually look at some additional initiatives that would support moving toward maximizing the Blue Zones criteria. A lot of the things, as you can probably imagine, do intersect with the scope of work of this committee or of this commission and of this department. I think I'm kind of taking it from like a listening perspective and, you know, welcoming any effort to increase the connectedness and safeness of our sidewalks or tackle the food deserts that exist in particularly certain areas of the city where it's just pretty inaccessible, especially if you don't have a car to get to the grocery store or an affordable grocery store. But I think TBD as to where the city council is going to fall on taking that next step into a project plan. So I think in the next month or so is when the city is expecting to receive that kind of ranking of where we are on the readiness list. But I'll pause there. I'm sure there's a lot of questions, I'm sure. And I know Commissioner Barrett and Commissioner Freeman were both able to attend the opening presentation, and so would welcome thoughts from them as well.
Mind if I go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm not a good source here. I've spent 30 years working in public health, and I see very much of what they're talking about having already been done or being done or ongoing in various ways, shapes, and forms, and not quite labeled as a Blue Zone. And if you break down what they're doing, we already do a tremendous amount of it. You know, we have Mizell Center doing a lot of work on nutrition and sociability, et cetera, for seniors. We have Parks and Rec working on getting people out and being active and involved. We have the Gay Center, LGBTQ Center doing a lot of those sorts of issues of that. And then that's what public schools do. Public schools try to get people to learn to become more healthy for themselves. So we're doing this, and so I'm uncomfortable with the Blue Zone labeling and packaging, and so I'm not a big supporter of this because we're already doing it, it worried me that they don't really try to connect their presentation with this long history of having done it and having been involved and tried in it. You know, I was involved in heart disease research. There's been multiple long studies about how you improve behavior that have been very similar in terms of trying to change community norms to reduce fat intake and to increase exercising and stop smoking, et cetera. So I'm not a big fan of the blue zone effort. That doesn't mean I'm not a fan of trying to improve the health of everybody, but from what I saw, I'm wondering, why are we doing this? Because we're already doing it. We just have a different title. We have a whole variety of different titles for it.
Yeah.
So that's my politics.
I had a similar reaction, and it was largely based on that there really wasn't anything, at least at the high level. They clearly had literally flown in with their stock presentation that they give to all of the cities. When anybody asked for them for the specifics, they said, oh, we actually have to kick the tires, so we don't do that. If you look at the sustainability plan, we have a very good sustainability plan. It has, as Vice Chair Baker knows, it has a wellness component. Really, all of the things that they were talking about that could be mapped pretty well into the sustainability plan, and then the prioritization that I think Commissioner Barrett, I think you were involved in that with and actually I think all the commissioners, but we had more commissioners, so but I think we were all involved in the refresh a couple of years ago, where we took the sustainability plan and then prioritized. So my view is to say is that I mean, this contract is signed, we'll see what they say. But I would strongly recommend that if this goes back to council, that it essentially be mapped against the city's existing initiatives that's already there, because I'd rather see money put into the programs that we've already outlined than more money for consultants, because I don't think we're going to get anything better. I think the city has a pretty good framework for these things. So I got the impression, I understand why then Councilmember Coors wanted to join on that, though. So it is not a useless exercise, but I think we're far ahead than many of the other cities and the county itself in having these programs that Commissioner Barrett just mentioned, and having a robust sustainability plan that I think is pretty well stood the test of time, even though that's now 7 years old. So that would be my, my 2 cents on that is that it was a kind of a been there, done that, or doing that more accurately for Palm Springs. Vice Chair Baker, you're our wellness guru.
We still haven't finished the biking plan. I mean, we're like sort of ignoring something we've been trying to get done for the 5 years I've been around, and unsuccessful at that. And now is not the time to jump into something new.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we're going to spend that money. Why not just put the money into bike lanes, down South Palm Canyon to connect to the Indian Canyons, where people can bike to Oswald Canyon, because there's a huge amount that's very near me, so there's a lot of cars there. So let's have a bike lane to get for people to get to Oswald Canyon or further down to Indian Canyons. If they want to go that far. At least obviously the city ends shortly after that, but yeah, let's be doing the things that we already said that we were going to do, and don't necessarily, haven't had the resources to put them together. So that was my reaction, is I'd rather put the money into programs than another consulting contract. Don't want to sort of throw cold water on the city's baby, but that was my reaction.
Is it
Go ahead.
my impression is that from the presentation last week, whenever it was, we did that, they did that first main presentation, was that somewhere around half of the people there were very enthused about it, and about the other half were in our baggage of, we're already doing these things. We don't need to have another label that sort of distracts from what we're already doing.
Yeah, that would be. Yeah. Go ahead, Commissioner Barrett. All right, I think you've probably gotten our feedback, which is to say, fine, let's see what they do, but at least we think that there's a lot already in the sustainability plan that can serve, that is already tailored to Palm Springs, and a list of things that we've already been there and done that. And so I think a lot of it is already in our sustainability plan and the refresh from about, I guess, probably close to 2 years ago now. And if you look at that, you know, you probably already have our list and could save on consulting time.
Totally. I will keep an eye out for recommended next steps and share those with this commission when those become available to us.
Okay, and if you could provide our feedback to whoever it is this Jay is running this process?
Who's that?
Who's sort of running this process? This
Actually,
community
assistant city manager Teresa Gallivan is the point
Okay,
person
she's
on
okay,
this.
fine. All
But
right,
it's
well,
actually,
then
it's
you-
really being driven primarily by the city council, but
Yeah,
in
yeah.
terms of who was pulling the events together, it was Tabby from her office and Denise, and then
Okay.
Teresa.
All right,
most
but
part.
if you could relay our feedback,
Mhm.
and then give her a copy of the sustainability plan, because.
Absolutely.
I
And I
think
did
that-
provide a copy of the sustainability plan to the Blue Zones team.
Great,
So,
okay, wonderful.
but yeah, I would be happy to share the feedback.
Okay, thank you.
Any other thoughts or questions on that before we move to the next item?
No. Okay, oh, next, okay. Sponsorship request for World Environment Day.
Sure. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen really quickly. Former Commissioner Jennifer Futterman has submitted this to the Sustainability Commission. She was unable to join us today. She has kind of an ongoing family emergency, so she was not able to convey the presentation, but sends her best regards to the commission. Says hi to everyone, hopes everyone's doing well. Former Commissioner Futterman has requested that the commission essentially renew their sponsorship of the Environmental Education Collaborative's art contest, which will be happening later this spring. They're asking for sponsorship of $2,500, which I think is consistent with what the sponsorship has been previously. You guys know more about this than I do, I think, because having been involved in the contest before, but if there are any specific questions that I can try to answer, I'm happy to do so. And, you know, happy to take any comments or feedback on this. I do believe we probably need a vote of the commission to
Yes.
decide what to do with this.
Just to confirm, this is in our budget. We would have the funds. I believe this is something that we've been doing for quite a few years. So
Yep.
this is a sort of recurring event. And I guess my thought is that we've been doing this, Miss Commissioner Futterman's, great input to the commission. This is a project that she brought, to the commission, and I'm glad that she's still bringing it to the commission. So I want to appreciate that, particularly since we don't have our own events, for Earth Day /month, where we're supporting other folks. This would be very much, and yes, it is, once again, it's another group, but we've kind of been the lead sponsor on this one for quite a few years, or one of the lead sponsors. So I think it's pretty good. Is she looking for volunteers for judging? Because I believe in past years, she's asked for volunteers to not only money, but some time from the commissioners to serve as volunteer judges.
There is a request here for, though it's a request with the smiley face, so it's probably like if somebody wants to.
And there it is right there, for
not a-
judging the contest in May as well for any interested commissioners. There it is right there.
There is not a specific requirement that we need perhaps 1 to 2 commissioners to judge, but she would welcome that.
Okay, great. I'm glad she put that in. I'll now rereading it then. Well, I'm going to entertain a motion if somebody wants to make a motion on this.
So moved.
Okay, and a second?
Second,
Okay, so we have a motion and second to approve an expense of $2,500 for the Sustainability Commission to be a sponsor of the 2023 Environmental Art Contest. This is an expenditure, so probably best to take a roll call vote on this one under AB 361. So Anita.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
David Friedman,
Aye.
Carl Baker,
Yes.
Don Barrett,
yes,
and Jake Torrance.
Yep.
So the vote is unanimous and it's approved.
Thank you. Okay, we will now move to subcommittee and commissioner reports. And the first would be, once again, Commissioner Barrett on Scour and Commissioner Torrance.
Okay, we have already covered some of what happened in the hour meeting. We are continuing with questions about how we get various multifamilies in particular to get to become involved in the compostable, not composting, compostable separation, and that's just an ongoing discussion. We've also talked about the issue of how you get restaurants to how we enforce restaurants that aren't following the rules. All of this is just there are the issues we're covering. I don't have an answer for those at the moment. Our largest part of our conversation was the issue of mulch. And I'm saying mulch, even though it's not really mulch. It's really about using the byproduct of having separated the compostables. We actually came to the conclusion, I'm fairly certain this is where we came. I don't have my notes in front of me, but if Commissioner Torrance or LP wants to oppose me, I won't be upset. But we basically came to the conclusion that we really need to work with the other cities in the valley to figure out what to do with recycling compostables, because running a distribution, if we went with mulch, it's a lot of mulch. We'd have to find some way to distribute it, and we would have to deal with the issue that we might be in competition with Home Depot or Lowe's or something like that. And we don't know enough about the issue of using a form of gas that is generated by the composting process and how we would distribute that. So we thought this is something like all the cities in the valley are going to have to be doing this. So, Mr. Seebag.
Yes, okay, I think I got the memo.
So that's the direction we're going.
Okay.
We would love to have an involvement in what happens in going in that direction, but it's got to, we feel like it ends up having to be a community, a valley-wide process.
Okay, timing is perfect. We have our energy and sustainability department meeting tomorrow. I will raise that with the powers that be. So thank you. Came to the right person there.
Commissioner Torrance, does that fit with your with how your perception of how we went through that?
Yeah, no, nothing else to add.
All right,
Okay.
I'll raise that and then maybe have one of my team members, perhaps LP, give you a call and then see what we can make of that. So the issue is essentially we have more quote unquote mulch than we or probably most of the other cities know what to do with. And so that's a question of what do we do with it? And can there be collective? And, one of the issues is if CVAC wants to plant trees, and I'll talk about that, is there a role for CVAG in essentially, working on that? Anyway, I don't know the technical answers, but do appreciate that this could be a regional discussion.
Yeah, and remember that it's not just mulch. It could be, there are other ways to convert whatever that output is into something sustainable. And the issues are of how you distribute it and all these sorts of things. It takes staffing to distribute stuff.
Okay, all right, LP, I'll saw your chat. I'll follow up tomorrow. And this is an SB 1383 requirement is specifically there. Okay, all right, I'll take a look at it and maybe send a quick note to my colleagues just to flag it for tomorrow. Okay, got it. Okay, all right. And I'm going to take over next on ad hoc subcommittee on strategic plan and general plan update. I don't have anything specific, and Vice Chair Baker, I think you had mentioned that the ad hoc committee, general plan committee, was going to have another meeting.
Yes, Chair. Finally, we got emails. They are coming out for meetings sometime in the next month or two. There were lots of delays, but we're back on track now.
Okay, and that'll be a public meeting of the general plan steering committee.
Yeah, I don't have a date certain yet, but I'll report back when we do.
Okay, all right, that's great. So we'll look to see what that is. I haven't heard that the housing element is, I think it's still pending. So, so we'll see what that is then. All right, stay tuned, keep us posted, and let us know when there's a date. Obviously, it'll be a Brown Act committee meeting. And solar and green building, I do have a number of things to report, but in the interest of time, I'm going to roll that into Desert Community Energy, Inland Regional Energy Network, because they're all somewhat related. So I'll not duplicate it, and I'll cover both at the same time. Keep that as a separate agenda item, but at least for this month, I'll roll it all together. There's a number of CPUC and CEC updates, so I'll talk about that. Bicycle routes and cycling, Commissioner Torrance.
Unfortunately, we don't have any new updates. Largely, our work has been stalled waiting for city staff to support the release of the survey that was approved by the committee back in October. So I am delighted to hear that LP has been successful at finding new recruits. And then I think then we might be able to launch the survey, because that's been the one limiting factor.
And Commissioner, if you might, and I can follow up with you offline, maybe if you and I might have a chance to put our heads together with Anita in the next like 2 weeks or so, we might be able to like soft launch some aspects of the survey, since we'll be doing so many Earth Day like little pop-ups. So
Yeah.
maybe it's where you and I can connect, and we can save the full effort for when we have staff on board to run it. But we can start getting some of that data and information and start priming the pump, so to speak, over the next month.
I think that would be great.
Okay, cool. I'll reach out to you and we can find some time to chat.
Thank you.
One thing I did want to note on this really quickly for the group. So Volunteer Palm Springs, which I guess is a local kind of volunteer collective, is doing a slightly more formalized ghost bike program for people who are killed in traffic violence while riding bikes. So they, I believe, have put up their first ghost bike from the program at the Ramon site where someone was killed the other morning. I think there may be a press conference that might be happening at some point this week at the site. But that is now, I believe it's a bike that was donated from the police department and then painted white. I believe it'll be up for 30 days. So that's it.
Okay, all right, thank you. I'm glad to see the surveys moving its way through. Next would be water conservation. That's me. A couple of things from the last two DWA board meetings this morning and then 2 weeks ago. First of all, it's raining all the time. So with the irrigation from above, obviously the conservation is meeting state and exceeding state targets. DW reported that at the last meeting, the March 7th meeting, the 12-month consumption is last 12 months as of January is 22.5% lower compared to the initial 2013 benchmark. So that to hold the sort of the goal of 10 to 13% compared with 2013. And then there was a previous goal of that the governor set the last couple of years ago to reduce water up to 20% compared with 2020, and water production is down 19.1% in January 23 compared with January 2020, which is probably last full month or so pre-COVID. So obviously, with all of the rain we've been having, the people are not using it for irrigation, so that's good. But I share Commissioner Barrett's view that a drought is still a drought. There's no reason for this should not be used as a reason for the city not to continue to work on turf conversion. And even with all the rain falling on California, the Colorado River Basin, which is where we get our water, remains in a drought position. So it may be great that Lake Oroville is spilling. We don't get there's only a contractual right, the state water contract, the agreement with Metropolitan Water District for an exchange, but our water comes from the Colorado River via the canal and the Metropolitan Water. So that that hydrological zone remains in very, very stressed, and the Bureau of Reclamation is looking to take some fairly drastic action. So the message is continue to conserve there. So that was from 2 weeks ago, a couple of things from this morning's meeting. The DWA has begun a Prop 218 cost study. So that began, and there will be some workshops as they look to potentially increase rates. There's a couple of steps that would need to be taken, but there will be some workshops. So LP, you might want to just coordinate with the folks there just to make sure that we're spreading the word so that people are aware that it's coming down. Those workshops were fairly well attended. I assume there'll be a virtual with perhaps an in-person option. And there was a mention that there is a state program, lower income household water assistance program, that will provide, can help pay some past due bills. And the amount just increased from $2,000 up to $15,000. And there's a new state funded contract. And that will begin in October 2023. So once again, LP, coordinate to make sure that that message goes through, so that there's something on our city website. And one of the advantages of the new rules, of the new Brown Act rules, DWA board is meeting in person, but they are now posting the meetings on their website. So if you don't get to attend in person, then you can go. You don't have to be on Zoom. They are still available on Zoom at 8 o'clock every other Tuesday morning, first and third Tuesday mornings, but they are now posted on the DWA website. So that's once again a good news. So probably a couple of things just to coordinate with the DWA team, just to make sure that we're sharing those messages. And they'll probably also have a booth next Saturday at 1 p.m. this coming Saturday, actually. Right. So that's it for water conservation. Next would be wellness from Vice Chair Baker.
Hey, so Lindsay, I saw your email this week speaking to Council Member DeHart regarding the Human Rights Commission not supporting the non-smoking ordinance, but am I incorrect on that?
That might not be, it might not have been from me, but that I don't have information that says that isn't correct. But I don't think I sent it.
Oh, I can't remember this. Sorry.
Okay, gotcha. That's good information to have, though.
but we made adjustments so they would accept it. So that was a prior, I think, a prior iteration of the agreement.
Right. I know we talked about that back in October. Is that something? Is it helpful for me to follow up with the commission to kind of get to the bottom of that?
It's up to the council, and we're waiting to hear some movement from them.
Right. Yeah, and actually, interestingly, and this is one thing I forgot to mention in the Blue Zones report, they do talk about no smoking ordinances being a big thing in Blue Zones.
Blue Zone reports. That's where I was reading that.
Got it. Okay, cool. So I can just check in with the Human Rights Commission potentially, or I guess maybe Commissioner Baker, I can follow up with you offline just to kind of see what the specific information delta is, and we can try to get rid of that.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. All right, Desert Community Energy, Inland Regional Energy Network. So a couple of things. The Inland Regional Energy Network, or IREN Executive Committee, met this afternoon. Mayor Ortiz of Indio is the Coachella Valley representative to the IREN Executive Committee. I had taken to the committee and got a unanimous vote of a partnership with the California Energy Commission to apply for funds from the Department of Energy under the Resilient and Efficient Codes implementation funding under the IIJA, Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or also known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. So that's a partnership with IREN, BayREN out of the Bay Area, of course, and 3C REN, which is the Central Coast of Ventura, San Luis Obispo, and Santa Barbara counties. So we're all working together, department with the CEC, and that application will be made next Monday for $10 million grants, two proposals. One is to increase the functionality of Solar App Plus. So LP friendly reminder to get your application in, have the city get the application in, because those funds are only available from the CEC through May 1. So time is coming through there. But this would expand, this would basically, most of the grant would be used to add additional features. The Solar App, which right now just covers single family retrofits for solar. So if you get solar panels on your existing house, it would be covered. But new modules, if the funding were available, would cover such things as new solar for new housing, which is required under the energy code, as well as battery storage and EV chargers in homes. And the big issue is heat pumps, because under new construction, a heat pump is required for water heating. So this would basically get automated permits. And the other one is more based on non-commercial, something called Code Cycle. And that helps some of the designers, those sort of the industrial designers who do lighting and things like that. It sort of helps them automate how they can comply, get the equipment to comply with the energy code and make sure that it is functioning as appropriate. So we have one potential residential program and another for commercial. So that's approved. The applications then will go in next week, and then we'll hear back in another, the CEC, which is the lead, we'll hear back at the end of June from the Energy Commission, whether they get one or both of the grants, and then we'll, we get some programs. They would be brought to the IREN Executive Committee for approval with agreement with CEC and launch in the fall, late fall. The next also on today's agenda is an agreement for IRAN to work with the Civic Sparks Fellows. So that was approved also, and LP you'll be hearing probably from my colleague Peter Karlstrom, but each city in the IRAN area every other year will be able to get one Civic Sparks Fellow. So you'll be contacted along with folks from there. We're not sure exactly, how prorated, how that's going to be, but everyone will be contacted to say for an expression of interest. And obviously with all the energy things that we have already pending in Palm Springs, there would certainly be, I think, room to keep a Civic Sparks Fellow very busy. Among those, of course, would be the reach codes that I am working on. Do expect hopefully to hear in the next week or so on the cannabis one that we talked with the consultant about. So they're what we call case report. They promised that for the end of the month, so we'll see. Unfortunately, I don't have a time frame from the statewide codes and standards of the residential energy efficiency. So we'll see what they're there, but at least we can, if we don't have to run the two of them on parallel tracks. And my suggestion, LP, is that once we get that other ordinance, I'll start working on it, and then we have to sit down with I'll come to the office and we'll sit down, and there's some other sort of a political sort of issues about how we want to deal with the requirement that large industrial commercial users use renewable energy. Edison is dropping from their what we call the joint rate comparison with Desert Community Energy, their green plan, which actually does not exist. So there'll be something in the DCE board. So that's basically it for IREN. For Desert Community Energy, the main event is the request for proposals. We got an order. We and all the other what we call load serving entities got an order from the California Public Utilities Commission to do additional procurement. So we did launch an RFP on March 7th, and that's due on the 31st, a week from Friday. We are actively trying to get proposals from the area, the wind and solar area in North Palm Springs, because it's owned, and that would be anything that we could do along the lines of the windmills that already exist up there is something that clearly is a priority. So it's an open RFP, but it clearly states priority is for local projects. So I'll perhaps have an update to the extent I can available. I'll have a brief update at the next DCE board meeting, which is April 5th, and in the large conference room. So DCE is going back to in-person meetings, and at least they're likely to be in the large conference room right there in City Hall. Commissioner Barron, if you're available, March 5th at 3 p.m. Vice Chair Baker, I know you're working, and we do want to get, we are hiring, and I'm hoping to get some folks on board who can help us revive the Community Advisory Committee.
You did mean April 5th.
Yes, April 5th, which is Wednesday. Yes, I did mean April 5th.
You
April
said
5th.
March.
Okay, April 5th. Sorry about that. Too many dates in my brain. April 5th at 3 p.m. The agenda will be posted probably once again the end of next week, next Thursday or Friday. And I got right about a bunch of staff reports there. So,
April 5th is a tax day,
oh, okay.
but I can, if it's at 3 p.m., I can get there.
Yeah. Anyway, so we'll get you both should be on the list for the agendas then. So there'll be some other things, but that's probably the big event there. And once again, a lot of procurement and things that we're really focused on. The other thing, which is somewhat related to both sort of the green building and energy is of course the new solar rules. They go into effect on April 15th, and we may get a proposal from a contractor who's an investment fund that's working with a solar installer. So that may be some opportunities to install solar and storage. So LPL, keep you posted. That has to once again be validated through the RFP process, but there may be some interest in driving more residential solar after the new rules go into effect. So lots of things going on. We are obviously going to be focused more on community programs at DCE, and we'll get the Community Advisory Committee involved in those. So that's basically it for a combination of green building, solar, and IREN and DC. A lot of things going on. Okay, and then I think we're done with the subcommittee and commission reports. So commissioner comments and upcoming agenda will go alphabetically. So Vice Chair Baker, anything else that you would like to see?
Nothing further.
Okay, Commissioner Barrett.
I just realized if we could move the April meeting 1 week from April 18th to April 25th, I can make it with no problem. So if that's possible.
That would be fine by me, but LP, why don't you offline confirm? But I think we could probably, Commissioner Baker, Commissioner Torrance, as far as I know, that would not be a conflict, and then I don't have the IREN Executive Committee meeting running into this one. LP, why don't you, Anita, why don't you confirm that offline? But if it works for the other commissioners, let's go for that and accommodate. Great. Okay, Commissioner Torrance, any further agenda items or other comments? Okay, and
No further items.
all right, and I don't have any further items. Sorry to use up all of your remaining voice. LP, Anita, thank you once again. Look forward to that. If we are moving the commission meeting to after Earth Day, just keep us posted so that we know what events are there, so that we can then attend it, and then there would be a report back at the meeting then. But you can check offline to confirm that works for everyone. And it's good to accommodate Commissioner Barrett if he's available then. Okay, well, I think with that on mind, we're going to adjourn to our next meeting, currently scheduled for April 18th, but to potentially be rescheduled to April 25th. And if that's the case, then LP and ED, you can get a notice of reschedule posted on the city website sooner rather than later to both let folks know. Okay, all right, at 7th, oh,
Yeah, I just add one thing. LP, if you could post somewhere so we could find it easily, what days we're at farmer's market.
okay, thank you very much.
Sure, I can do that.
Okay, well, if there's nothing further, okay. Then now at 7:13, we are adjourned. Thank you, staff and commissioners for another meeting, and unless council adds more people in the next few weeks, I will see you all in 2 weeks. DC will probably also be at 1 PS picnic, so I may see some of you there. All right, thank you very much. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
Hi, everyone.
Bye. Bye.